guys, and welcome to the afternoon session of webinar number 5.
Hello.
My name is Robert.
I'm Ignatius.
And we are here to talk about the printer installation. So things we have to consider when we set up a printer on the customer side. And well, as always, let me start with saying that if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We try to answer them after each corresponding section.
Yes.
If there is a bigger question coming up or another topic, just put it also in the chat and we try to answer it at the end of the webinar and just to keep the flow of the webinar alive. All right, let's check out the agenda for today's webinar. As I mentioned, it's all about the printer installation. So we want to see how we can unbox the thing. What do I have to consider when I place the machine somewhere? Network, a big topic which was also discussed in previous webinars. So there were a lot of questions telling us, hey, put a network topic into a future webinar. There it is. Topic number 4 would be the first print job, things we have to prepare before we start this job. And last but not least, topic number 5, things we have to do after the print job is done. All right, should we start?
Yeah.
Cool.
If there's no preliminary questions, then we can jump right into it. Okay, thank you, Robert. So with the unboxing, we are looking at the shipping container that it is shipped in, as well as the contents in that with the printer. So the first thing that we see is the shipping box that it is shipped in. Please note that if you are going to be moving the machine in your warehouse or location or shipping it to a different location, it's beneficial to always keep the original packaging and pack it tightly in that to move it around for reliable and secure moving or relocation. And the thing to notice here is on every container there is a shock and a tilt watch. This is for verification that the package has been shipped in a predictable manner, that it hasn't gone through any existential damage through hitting or dropping or tilting, so to speak. So on the right hand side you can see that there is a red indicator and then a clear indicator on the shock watch. The clear indicator is what it should look like, and that goes the same for the tilt watch. If it is damaged, it will come up with red. Please document this with images and get in contact with your distributor and then we'll take it from there, because there's a certain process that we follow in these instances to make sure that the machine is still in a good condition on your side. But unfortunately, this does happen from time to time. All right. The next thing is to look at the contents. So you get the printer, pretty self-explanatory. Then there are 2 different kits. There's the by default starter kit that comes with every printer. Then there's an upgrade or an accessory package that basically just expands on this starter kit. We're not going to go through all the items in that because it can change with time, but if anybody sees an item there and they're not sure what it's for, please feel free to ask it so that we can clarify that. But the main object here is there are some general objects in here for maintenance of the components and the post-process topics. Then there are machine class related things, which would be namely the reservoir and the build platform. And then there's machine build relevancy. So this would be the USB stick that is particularly set up for that printer. Okay, but the gist of it is that you have some cleaning equipment, you have the actual using equipment or accessories, and then just the USB stick that's totally dependent on that build of the machine. I don't see any questions, so I think it's fine or fair enough to say that we'll just continue from here.
Yes.
Robert?
All right, let me take over. So placement. I think you can imagine that it's crucial to have a good placement for the printer. And let me tell you what it's all about. So first of all, you can see on the picture in our presentation that yes, you need definitely 2 people. They are necessary to carry the printer in a safe way. It can be quite heavy, depends on the machine class, what you bought. So a 40 and a 30 could be between 30 to 40 kilograms, and therefore take care that not a single person is carrying the printer, just to make sure that they are not getting injured or the printer is falling on the floor or something like that. All right, so the next point, I think it is pretty clear that you need some kind of a stable surface. What you can see maybe also on our back here, the machine is positioned on a solid table, but from time to time it could happen that a customer is using something what he has in his office. There could be even a table of just 1 foot, what you can find in some bars like that, and this is not a safe position, so you could have some vibrations on it. The other problem could be that right next to the printer there's a big milling machine, and this milling machine, while it is performing the milling, can produce also vibrations, which can be bad for our printer. So take care that the machine is positioned on a stable surface, not surrounded by any other big unit which can cause vibrations. All right. Clean environment. I think this is also pretty obvious why we need a clean environment. You can imagine our light engine is equipped with a certain lens. We have lots of glass components in between the light engine and the reservoir. So we have to make sure that there is no dirt or dust which is producing some kind of a stray light. So if there is a dust particle on the glass elements, you can imagine that the light cannot travel through the glass elements anymore in a safe and straight way. So we want to make sure that you do not have any kind of milling dust in the room. So this must something we have to make the customer aware of. The last one, UV protection. Yes, we are working with resin which is getting cured in UV light. So any UV light source, what could be the sunshine outside or inside, lots of lights in the room can have an influence on the resin. So let's say you just removed a print job from the platform, you just put it on a table, go out, drink a cup of coffee. This will cause some kind of additional curing, which would mean the accuracy of your print job is not secure anymore. So make sure that the printer is not stationed or positioned right next to a window. Make sure that it's in a almost dark place, and if the customer can afford it or he want to invest some money into UV protection, that would be the best way to handle our system.
No argument there.
All right, so I can see that there's so far no questions, so I think we can just
I
move
think
forward.
at this point it should be fine.
Oh, there it is.
All right, like Robert said, a big topic is the network setup of a new machine. We have a lot of customers that tell us that sometimes it works without a problem, and then other times it doesn't work at all. And it all comes down to the configuration process that you are using. Because internally, depending if you're using a LAN connection or a wireless local area network, it will depict whether or not you're using the internal router or the actual controller PC to access the network. And so there's just different processes to get this information through to the printer software so that it can replicate that and actually perform it accordingly. Okay, so we're looking at the LAN, the Wi-Fi, and then we're also going to look at some DHCP and comparing that with the static connections. So first look at the LAN. These two images are for the 10 and the 20, and on the right hand side is the 30 and the 40, just for clarification. Then first we'll look at using the LAN setup with the DHCP. Now DHCP is referring to Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Okay, so basically what this means is the printer is telling your network saying, hi, I'm a new printer, can you please give me some ID in the form of an IP address, and then the router or the network just supplies it to the printer. Okay, and to do this is you have that LAN connection to the machine, then you go and set in the network menu of the printers. As you can see, they're fairly similar. in the network settings you go and set the DHCP, and then you select use LAN. This is very important, so this is basically the confirmation button, so that's the last step. Okay. Then we're comparing this to the static. To use static with a LAN connection, you need to have 4 items of information. The first one is the IP address that you'd like to use in your network, ensuring that it doesn't conflict on a different component that you have on that same network. You will need a subnet, you will need the gateway and the DNS address. Okay. The best way to obtain these would be to speak to your IT department internally if you have that. If that's not possible, then it's best to look at your the current network that your PC is connected to. But this is, I think, we're covering topics that are outside of this now. But yes, so you need these 4 things. Then you say confirm that I want to set it to a static IP, and then confirming it lastly with the using the LAN interface. Okay. It's fairly straightforward, but it is important to have it in this order so that it is properly configured. Always best to restart the machine so it boots up in this configuration to verify it across all borders. Now, when we're looking at the WLAN or the WLAN or the Wi-Fi connection, or however you wish to pronounce it, on the touch screens you can swipe from right to left on the screen. That will display this interface, which is the activating the Wi-Fi in the bottom left block of this grey section. Similar to any Windows 10 interface system, it allows you to then select your network that is available in the list and then just input the password for that specific network. Best way to do this is with a keyboard connected to the printer, but there are onboard keyboards or on-screen keyboards. It's just for the 20 it might be a little bit small. Okay, so we first go and connect in the Windows interface. We go into the printer software and we go to the network menu again, and here we go and activate this in the Wi-Fi settings. So when we go into this menu, we see there is a list of the available networks, again visible, and we just go and confirm the network that we want to use. As you can see on the 20 and the 30, they're the same relatively, and you say connect. Okay, then you can go back into the previous menu and then activate this or confirm this with the use Wi-Fi connection. Now there's just one thing to note here. When you are using the LAN connection, you can view the IP address of the printer in your network settings or in the information page on your printer. Now this is the IP address that's below, the IP address that's below the actual IPs, okay? Not the 172.22.1.1, but in this instance on the left-hand side we have the 192.168.50. I think that's 91. Okay, that's for the LAN. When you want to find the IP address of the Wi-Fi, because we're not going via the router, it is located in the Windows interface. Okay, now this can be founded as follows. You can close the printer software, and then with the keyboard connected, you can push the Windows key, or you go into the Start menu. You go and search for CMD, which is a shortcut for command prompt. And in this interface, or what looks like DOS, you can use the function ipconfig as it is displayed here. We're just typing ipconfig, hitting enter, and then it displays all the IP addresses or all the configurations for the IPs in this machine. And the one we're looking for is the WLAN one, that's right at the bottom here, and the IPv4 address is the one that we're looking for. So this would be the address that you then use in your NetFab to communicate on the network to the printer, as long as that NetFab PC is also running on the same network. This is very important because we've had this before where customers tell us it's on the same network, but in actual fact it wasn't. Or in their internal IT or internal network, there's some restrictions with our printers accessing. So the best way to resolve this sometimes would be to get IT involved, but ultimately this is the process to configure it. The next thing that we wanted to talk about is enabling the static when using Wi-Fi connection. Now, for this, you will need some admin rights in the Windows, and we at rapidshape can supply you with the temporary admin rights, whether it be 3 days or something like this. All it is you download the file that we send you, you run it, and you input a password that's also supplied, and this will give you that X amount of days of temporary admin rights to configure your static IP address via the LAN, the Wi-Fi connection. Okay. Again, this is best done with an IT person involved because it is a little bit tricky, especially if we have to do it remotely, because we're like, can you see this? And then the customer might not know exactly what we're referring to. Okay. But it is possible, it is available, I mean, it works. But it is all about the process of configuration. Okay. I don't see any questions, and I tried to be as concise as possible, and I hope that's because it made sense to everyone. But feel free to ask if anything doesn't make sense. But in this instance, I think we can just continue.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so now we have covered the unboxing, the placement, we have covered the network, so now we actually want to print something. A couple of things we have to check before we start with the initial print, and as you can see in the presentation, we are covering here 4 different topics, subtopics. So we start with the build platform parallelism, followed by light calibration, RFID functionality, and the scaling print job. Alright, so build platform parallelism. We want to make sure that the build platform is parallel in relation to the reservoir. So if this is not parallel, you can imagine if the platform is a bit tilted like that, you have a bigger gap on one side and a smaller gap on the other side if you move down with the platform onto the reservoir, and therefore you cannot expect a perfect print job. So we want to make sure at rapidshape that the machine which is delivered is tested and that it's like plug and play. But because the machine is transported, we should definitely cross-check the situation at the customer's site. So what we do here is the following. First of all, we will insert the calibration glass into the machine, which is also part of every starter package. Then you perform the find zero move. If you do not remember how to do that, please check out our previous webinars where we discussed the user interface, and there is a pretty clear explanation how to find this function in all machine classes which are available.
Yeah.
So we would perform the find zero move. That means basically the platform is just moving all the way down until it has reached the calibration glass, and our load cell is detecting with the force level that it has reached the bottom of the calibration glass. What we do then is we just try to slide a card, which is also part of the delivery, under the edges, under all 4 edges of the build platform. That should not be possible in a perfect world, in a perfect situation. So let's assume there was some damage in transportation or maybe a bit of a change here. So that would mean that, as you can see in the upper picture, that on one edge you might be able to slide the paper card below the platform. That would mean that there we have a gap which is too big for the printing process. What we do then is displayed in the lower picture. So basically we have 2 different types of screws mounted in the build platform. One is the screw A or ID A. This is the big one, which is actually just there to hold the platform in a certain position. So here we can just open the screws if we have a problem here, and then we just need to adjust the height of the build platform with the smaller screws, which would be the screw mentioned here as ID B. If you turn the small screw, the B screw, clockwise, you just pull down the platform a little bit, so you lower the platform at this position. If you turn it anti-clockwise, you actually higher the position of the build platform. And you just perform these steps over and over again until you have reached a position of the build platform where you cannot slide a card under one of these edges. Which basically means after you did the adjustment, you fix the position with screw A, you make a move upwards or a reference move, followed by another find zero move. And this way you can cross-check if your adjustment was done the correct way, if the machine is prepared. Alright, of course you will also find documents and videos how to do that on our Knowledge Center, so please we would refer to that if you have further questions. For the moment I think we can continue. Alright. So another thing which is crucial to the machine or to the printing process, and also something for the user maintenance, is the light calibration. Light calibration is the most important user maintenance for our machines. We have to do that on a weekly basis. The reason why is that over time the LED loses energy, so the output is less than before. That means we have to calibrate the LED output every single week. And the things we need to do that, or the required equipment, is the UV light sensor, which is also comes with the machine, same as the UV glasses, and the calibration tool. You might see that the calibration tool looks a bit different from machine class to machine class, but at the end you just insert this one to the machine, you connect the sensor to the printer and put the sensor into the calibration tool. Let's take a look how this is done. Here I have an example, or basically two examples. One on the left hand side is for the 20 plus machine, and the one on the right hand side is the 30 plus machine. So, as I mentioned, first thing you do is you insert the calibration tool followed by the light sensor. Make sure that the glass side of the light sensor is showing downwards, that we can measure a proper value. Alright, and where to find the buttons, I would also refer to a previous webinar. We discussed this in the previous user interface webinar. So if you do not know how to find it, either check out the old webinar or you go to the Knowledge Center where you can also find videos and documents for that.
Yep.
Alright. Cool. So far, no questions in regards to the calibration process, so we can proceed with the RFID tags. The RFID functionality is well maintained or is set up with an RFID tag on the bottle. This RFID tag just contains the information about which material it is and what's the expiry date of that specific bottle. That means by just holding the bottle with the RFID tag right next to the printer, where you can see the RFID sticker on it, means that you can basically write the data on the reservoir which is inserted. So first thing, you insert the reservoir into the machine, hold the bottle right next to the RFID reader sticker, and then you confirm with the save button on the machine's display that you want to store this data on the reservoir. Why do we need this information? It's quite easy. We just want to prevent some job errors. Basically, what could happen is that a customer is preparing a print job with a different material that you want to use later on.
Yes.
And that could mean that you just lose your complete print job, and we just want to give the customer some guidance here, that he does not lose any jobs or a lot of money because resin is expensive. Well, now we had the question in the webinar this morning that what happens when I have two bottles of the same material and I can use one bottle with the RFID tag but not the other one. So maybe the RFID tag has some damage. So this RFID tag is provided by the material manufacturer. What you could do then is just that you are able to start a print shop. You might be in need of a rush print shop or something. You could use the open parameter set in NetFab to just bypass the validated workflow. We would not recommend it on a daily basis, but for emergency situations like that, you definitely can do that. The other option as a distributor is that you just log in with your distributor code onto the machine's setup menu, and then you can change the date for the grace period. So the period where the customer is allowed to print outside of the validated workflow.
Yes.
Let's say the customer just has one bottle left and this RFID tag is not working. This way you can give him the chance to finish his print jobs.
Yeah.
All right. There is so far no questions. Please let us know if there's anything, if anything comes up in your mind about that. If not, I would just finish with the scaling print job.
Yes.
So first print job, what we want to do on the machine should be always the scaling job. So this is something, a job which I can print to confirm that the scaling job, that the scaling factors which we discovered in the final inspection phase of the manufacturing process was done in the correct way, if this scaling factor is still true or not. So where to find this job? You just go on the flash drive which comes with the machine. It's the blue small USB drive, and in the subfolder 5, which is called calibration and scaling, you will find a STL file which you upload to NetFab. And let's take a closer look how that looks like. You can see we have here a couple of crosses in the center, and in the corner, pretty small, you have 4 cubes. In every corner, 1 cube, and these small cubes we use to measure the scaling factors in X and Y. Now, you see you measure 2 times in all axes, that means one front, lower, left and right. And let me show you how this is done. So now I can explain the full process here in the webinar. I will do that, but please be aware that you find a detailed explanation about how to do that also in the subfolder calibration and scaling. Let's just go back. So in the very same folder where you find the STL file, you also find the Excel spreadsheet. When you open up this spreadsheet, you get the information about which parameter set you should use. That should always be the calibration parameter set of the available machine class, what you have there. The reason is that we just want to make sure that we measure only the machine accuracy, not the material accuracy. And therefore, on this calibration parameter set, we subtracted the offset and shrinkage values. Here we are. So this way we want to make sure that it's all about the machine and nothing else is measured. Well, when this job is printed, what you do is you just leave it on the platform and you measure it as shown in the Excel spreadsheet with your caliper. Again, we have 2 measurements per axis, and you first thing what you do is you enter the used scaling factors for this job. You enter the measured values from this job, and this spreadsheet will automatically recalculate the scaling factors. Now, we assume that this should be fine, so that there's no change of scaling factors, but let's say you discovered a change in the scaling factors. What you need to do is you have to change these scaling factors in 2 locations. The first one is in the machine setup menu of NetFab. So what you do in the basic installation of NetFab, you perform again, so you change the scaling factors there. In addition to that, you also change the scaling factors on the machine setup menu. So you would log in with the customer code, and there you will find the customer button, and there you can also enter the new scaling factors. All right, so yeah, this is something you can discover on the USB flash drive of the machine, just in case you do not know where to find. And so far,
I might just add
please.
on to what Robert said regarding the measurement of these cubes. It is very important to have consistency with the measurement, because if person 1 measures it and they're very gentle, and then person 2 does the same measurement but they're a bit more forceful, they will have different measurements. and this will then ultimately affect your final result. So just have some consistency when you are measuring these cubes to have consistent results at the end of the day.
That is a very good point, yes. All right, I can see that there is a question coming up about the resin, so I think this is all about the RFID tags. So if the customer uses one bottle of resin to register for the reservoir, after he used all the resin in this bottle, can he use another bottle to register again? Yes, he can, because remember you have the information about the expiry date on this chip, on this RFID tag. That means you could have a bottle which has an expiry date like August 2020 and the other one in December 2020, and we want to make sure that we are always using the validated workflow. And this way we can have a secure printing process.
So whenever you are swapping to a new bottle, always register that new bottle with the reservoir.
Yeah.
This will also have an effect on how it thinks there's enough material inside, so that when you have a new material assigned to it, it will immediately recognize that more material would have been added to that reservoir as well.
Exactly. Okay, I hope this question was answered.
Yes.
That?
Yeah, so Young is asking another follow-up question on if you can assign this. So, to summarize this, the reservoir has an ID tag, okay, which we store information onto, which would be what type of reservoir it is and what material is inside that reservoir. The material bottle has an RFID tag that only gives information of what material is inside that bottle. So the reservoir can always be given more information because it just overwrites that on its own tag. So you can go and assign 5 different materials to the same reservoir in a row. It will only store the last saved material to that RFID tag. Okay, so you can keep swapping materials as you wish, notably that you are cleaning the reservoir between these swapped materials. Yes, so that you're not cross-contaminating.
All right, there is another question coming up about the scaling job. So would we recommend to do that at every installation? Yes, I think we should do that all the time, because this way we can just also prove to the customer, hey, this machine comes out of the box in a really prepared state, so that this is always done at rapidshape headquarters.
Yeah.
This can be proven with this scaling job.
And the second thing on printing that scaling job is you can confirm that you are printing on a full build area. So all the crosses are not interconnected, they are independently placed on the build platform. This will confirm that your full build platform is printing accurately and reliably. So it's always beneficial.
Okay, then what calipers are used to measure? Well, for the rapidshape technician at least, we can say that we do have them with us during an installation, so they do not come with the printer. That's I think important to mention here. So you have to bring that on the installation yourself.
It's digital calipers, but again, it's all about consistency. Yeah. If you are familiar with using manual calipers or analog calipers where you're actually measuring visually, then always use that process consistently. If you're always using digital, use the digital. They're a bit more reliable when you're crossing between different people using it. It just really comes down to consistency with that measurement.
All right, I hope.
Yeah, so Antonio, so the calipers do not come with the printer. This is a separate thing because it is just part of maintenance or of a checking on installation. So it's a technician-based tool. It's not necessarily an end customer-based tool unless they want to go down that scaling process for themselves according to their own validation processes. Because if they have that, then essentially they also have a lot of other tools that do not come along with the printer.
Yes. Okay, I think we can move on maybe to the follow-up topic. If there is another question, just put it in the chat. We will answer them at the end of the webinar. So now we have finished the first print job. Everything is fine. Now we need to know what things we have to do after the print job is done. And one thing I have to mention right away at the start, we do not want to discuss the post-processing here at the moment. This will be done in a future webinar, most likely next week. This topic is all about cleaning, basically. So let's take a look at that. Well, first of all, pretty obvious, clean all relevant tools. So every tool you get in touch with the resin, like the spatula, like the removal tool. There could be some dripping of the platform onto the removal tool. And definitely you will have resin on the build platform. So what you do here is pretty easy. You just use a generous amount of isopropanol onto this tool, wipe it away. If you do this, take care that you use gloves all the time. You do not want to get in touch with the resin too much. So always wear protective gloves for you. So these tools needs to be cleaned. I think we saw it a couple times at customer side. If they just forgot about this, things like the spatula, they can't use it anymore because there's a lot of cured resin on top. And therefore, just make sure that they're always cleaning their tools after the print job is done. Well, and then most important thing to clean is the reservoir. So in the reservoir we have a silicone layer. On top of that we have a Teflon foil which is glued to the silicone, and you can imagine if you use sharp tools to clean the reservoir, you end up damaging the Teflon foil in a way that you cannot use the reservoir anymore. So how to perform the reservoir cleaning? I just want to quickly walk through all these steps. You will also find the videos and the explanation online on our Knowledge Center, but just to get a brief overview about how to do that. As you can see, we need several tools. We need a funnel, we need filter, we need lots of isopropanol, we need the rubber spatula and the microfiber cloth. So first step would be, we want to make sure that all the resin which is now trapped in the reservoir is filled back into the bottle. What we do here is we want to make sure that everything is getting filtered, because you could have some small cured elements or even some dirt or dust particles in the liquid, and we want to avoid having a contamination with the resin which is still in the bottle at the moment. So you just use the corner of or the edge of the reservoir to just pour it back into the bottle using a filter and a funnel, followed by using a rubber spatula to get rid of most of the resin inside. You just carefully move down the rubber spatula to get all the resin out. If you have this stage that just a couple drops of resin is in the reservoir at the moment, you just end up putting lots of isopropanol inside. You make sure that you mix the resin with the isopropanol by using the rubber spatula, for example. And this mixture of resin and isopropanol you can pour back into a waste container, what you can see in the pictures here, picture number 3, because you cannot use that liquid anymore for printing. I think that's quite obvious. And the last step is, after you have put the mixture into the waste container, we want to make sure that there's no residual liquid whatsoever on the Teflon foil. So that means that you end up using the microfiber cloth to not damage the Teflon foil, or you could also use an air gun, compressed air, to remove all the liquid what end up in the reservoir. We also want to make sure that there's no resin on the frame, on the plastic frame of the reservoir. So there should be no more resin in the reservoir before we start the next job. You can imagine, let's say the previous job was a model job. This is an opaque material. The following job is a surgical guide job, which would be transparent. If there's just 1 or 2 drops of resin from the model job inside, this will contaminate the material. We do not have a biocompatible product anymore, so we want to make sure that this is extremely clean. We also want to point out that because you can see that this procedure takes some time and practice.
Yes.
It's a bit dangerous because we always have the risk of damaging the Teflon foil. we want to recommend that the customer is always using one reservoir for one type of resin.
Yes.
This makes it much easier to handle the whole production in a safe way.
Yeah.
But we just want to give some documentation out in case you want to clean the reservoir.
Yes.
Okay, now that was a lot of talking. Then again, check out the videos on the Knowledge Center of our homepage if you have questions about the reservoir cleaning.
Yes, just to add onto that, sorry,
Perfectly
I'm
fine.
jumping in on Robert's topics here.
That's okay.
Cleaning the reservoir is very important, yes. But this is not something that if you have a consistent workflow in your workspace where you're constantly turning over material, this is something that you will do when you want to store that reservoir for a period of time, for holidays or something, or if you're swapping over to a new material, then you need a thorough cleaning of that reservoir. If you are just inspecting it for management reasons or maintenance reasons, you only need to filter that material out, inspect the Teflon layer, make sure that all the residual material has been passed through the filter, then you can pour that back into the reservoir and continue printing. So it's not about total cleaning just between prints, it is only for long-term storage or swapping over to a new material.
All right. Then we had a follow-up question from Sean about the microfiber gloves. That's a good point. So can they purchase any microfiber glove from a store, or do they have to buy the rapidshape gloves? Well, the reason
tricky
why
question.
That's tricky, yes. So obviously, yes, we would love the customer to buy the microfiber gloves from us,
Yes.
but of course, most of the customers will just buy it somewhere else.
Yes.
Just make sure that these are really microfiber gloves, because what we also saw sometimes in some installations that they keep using like these blue papers or the blue cleaning gloves, what you see in the pictures right here, and they can be too rough. So what you see here is some kind of rubbing movements on the Teflon foil if you do not use microfiber gloves.
Yeah.
So we just want to equip the customer at the beginning with all the tools they need to start their production, and therefore we put a couple of microfiber gloves inside. What they do later on, it's not in our hands. Yes, we would love to have some orders for microfiber gloves, but yes, I think most of them will just buy somewhere else.
And this is the same for the sieves that come with the kit. It's just a preliminary sample amount. As long as it abides by the same gradient of filtering, then you can use any kind that's available. Okay.
Then how many prints per tray in ideal conditions? A question from Antonio. Well, in ideal conditions, a tray, so the glass tray with silicone and Teflon, must be able to print 300 jobs in ideal conditions. But the conditions are really the crucial point here. So it really depends how the customer treats his reservoirs. They could be they could print much more than 300 jobs with this reservoir if they treat it the right way, or they could also damage the reservoir after a couple jobs. There could be because there was some cured element on the platforms which was not removed after the previous job, and then they start another job. This is just pushed into the Teflon, damaging the Teflon right away. So it's all about the treatment of the customer.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is a tricky one because it's so delicate.
And then we have the question from Sean about cleaning the microfiber gloves for multiple uses. Well, in my experience, I think that's pretty difficult to do, to clean them in a way that you can reuse them. So I would recommend to use always a fresh microfiber glove to make sure that there's no cross-contamination. You never know if there's something on the microfiber glove from the last cleaning run, if there's maybe a small element, and we do not want to risk.
Because the big risk here is, yes, okay, so you're cleaning with the microfiber cloth and you may be storing it inside a container of isopropanol that is airtight and away from UV light. The risk of some residual resin that's still on that cloth curing, then using that same cloth with the hardened cured part in your Teflon layer, that will definitely have a negative effect. So this, ultimately, our recommendation would be don't use the same cloth purely for the risk, unless it's like immediately. I wouldn't recommend to store it and use the same cloth weeks for weeks, because the risk just becomes greater as time goes on. But yes, and I think if you buy bulk online, they're fairly cheap and inexpensive, so it shouldn't be such a big detriment at the end of the day.
Yes, okay. How long does P-Pro resin has to be shaked before pouring from the bottle? Well, you just, that's hard to say, you just shake it well.
I think they should ask.
Yeah, and also, that's a good point. I'm sure you want to point out the material manufacturer responsibility.
Yes.
So yes, in case you have any type of questions regarding how to use this resin, contact the material manufacturer. What we do is we just shake it a couple times. We want to make sure that there's no separation between those two liquids inside, or it can look like two liquids inside. So just shake well before you pour it inside. Then we have a question regarding the build plate calibration. Can you loosen all screws A, back off screws B, find zero, tighten screws B until they make contact? This is one way to do it. Personally, I would just prefer to just find the spots or the edges where we have a gap which is too big, and then you can work on these edges only. But I also saw customers doing it like this, so opening up all 4 screws. In my opinion, this just needs more steps, or you end up performing more steps than necessary.
Yeah, look, if you become very familiar with the process and the mechanics of the build platform, then whatever works best for your process is fine. We just have our recommended process that comes with the machine and so on and so forth. But by all means, if you find something that works better for you and it is not damaging anything, then I don't see why you cannot continue doing what works.
All right, and then Antonio mentioned that Nextant has very precise timing. I guess you are referring to the shaking.
1 minute on the dot.
On the
no
dot.
more, no less.
Yeah, so it really comes down to the material manufacturer. So far, we do not have. Oh, there's something coming up. A link about the P-Pro materials. I think that looks good. I guess you will find the information there, but yeah, let us cross-check information.
I think at the end of the day, when you are shaking material, it's like Robert said, it should just be homogeneous. You don't want separated material, especially when you're pouring material from a new container into a reservoir that already has material. You don't want there to be imbalance of certain chemicals, which could ultimately affect your printing process.
Okay, I guess we have covered the questions. Feel free to just enter more of them.
I think, is that the end?
That is the end, actually.
Right.
So now it's Q&A time.
We'll just continue here. We do have some more
That's
time.
Perfect.
So please feel free.
All right, so seems like there's a description for, in this case, the P-Pro Master Model Dark Beige. Yeah, I'm sure you'll find the explanations on that site, on that link. Yeah, I think it looks good.
Yeah.
Anything else to discuss at the moment? Looks good. All right.
So I think we can, there's no further questions yet, so we'll just continue and going and saying thank you very much for joining us for this webinar number 5, where we were covering printer installation processes and other topics related to this. We won't have another webinar this week, but we will continue again as normal with 2 webinars from next week onwards, so on and so forth. So please join us there, because the more people joining us here, the more motivation we have to also keep this going, especially in these times. So thank you very much.
Yeah, also from my side, thank you very much for joining and giving us so much feedback. It's really fun to work with you, and just let me say, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay 3-dimensional. See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.